Book 1, Chapter 25, of Resurrection. His conversation with the President and the fresh air quieted Nekhludoff a little. He now thought that the feelings experienced by him had been exaggerated by the unusual surroundings in which he had spent the whole of the morning, and by that wonderful and startling coincidence. Still, it was absolutely necessary to take some steps to lighten Maslova's fate, and to take them quickly. Yes, at once. It will be best to find out here in the court where the advocate Fanarin or Mikishin lives. These were two well-known advocates whom Nekhludoff called to mind. He returned to the court, took off his overcoat, and went upstairs. In the first corridor he met Fanarin himself. He stopped him and told him that he was just going to look him up on a matter of business. Fanarin knew Nekhludoff by sight and name, and said he would be very glad to be of service to him. Though I am rather tired, still, if your business will not take very long, perhaps you might tell me what it is now. Will you step in here? And he led Nekhludoff into a room, probably some judge's cabinet. They sat down by the table. Well, and what is your business? First of all, I must ask you to keep the business private. I do not want it known that I take an interest in the affair. Oh, that of course. Well? I was on the jury today, and we have condemned a woman to Siberia, an innocent woman. This bothers me very much. Nekhludoff, to his own surprise, blushed and became confused. Fanarin glanced at him rapidly, and looked down again, listening. Well? We have condemned a woman, and I should like to appeal to a higher court. To the Senate, you mean, said Fanarin, correcting him. Yes, and I should like to ask you to take the case in hand. Nekhludoff wanted to get the most difficult part over, and added, I shall take the costs of the case on myself, whatever they may be. Oh, we shall settle all that, said the advocate, smiling with condescension at Nekhludoff's inexperience in these matters. What is the case? Nekhludoff stated what had happened. All right, I shall look the case through tomorrow or the day after. No, better on Thursday. If you will come to me at 6 o'clock, I will give you an answer. Well, and now let us go. I have to make a few inquiries here. Nekhludoff took leave of him and went out. This talk with the advocate, and the fact that he had taken measures for Maslova's defence, quieted him still further. He went out into the street. The weather was beautiful, and he joyfully drew in a long breath of spring air. He was at once surrounded by izvozchiks offering their services, but he went on foot. A whole swarm of pictures and memories of Katusha and his conduct to her began swirling in his brain, and he felt depressed, and everything appeared gloomy. No, I shall consider all this later on. I must now get rid of all these disagreeable impressions, he thought to himself. He remembered the Korshagin's dinner, and looked at his watch. It was not yet too late to get there in time. He heard the ring of a passing tram-car, ran to catch it, and jumped on. He jumped off again when they got to the marketplace, took a good izvozchik, and 10 minutes later was at the entrance of the Korshagin's big house. End of Book 1, Chapter 25.
Book 1, Chapter 26 of Resurrection. Please to walk in, Your Excellency, said the friendly, fat doorkeeper of the Korshagin's big house, opening the door, which moved noiselessly on its patent English hinges. You are expected. They are at dinner. My orders were to admit only you. The doorkeeper went as far as the staircase and rang. Are there any strangers? Asked Nekhludoff, taking off his overcoat. Mr. Kolosov and Michael Sergeyevich only, besides the family. A very handsome footman with whiskers, in a swallowtail coat and white gloves, looked down from the landing. Please to walk up, Your Excellency, he said. You are expected. Nekhludoff went up and passed through the splendid large dancing-room, which he knew so well, into the dining-room. There the whole Korshagin family, except the mother, Sophia Vassilievna, who never left her cabinet, were sitting round the table. At the head of the table sat old Korchagin, on his left the doctor, and on his right a visitor, Ivan Ivanovich Kolosov, a former Marechal de Noblesse, now a bank director, Korchagin's friend and a liberal. Next, on the left side, sat Miss Rayner, the governess of Mrs. Little Sister, and the 4-year-old girl herself. Opposite them, Mrs. Brother Petia, the only son of the Korchagins, a public schoolboy of the 6th class. It was because of his examinations that the whole family was still in town. Next to him sat a university student who was coaching him, and Mrs. Cousin, Mikhail Sergeyevich Telegin, commonly called Misha. Opposite him, Katerina Alexeyevna, a 40-year-old maiden lady, a Slavophil. And at the foot of the table sat Missy herself, with an empty place by her side. "Ah, that's right. Sit down. We are still at the fish," said old Korchagin with difficulty, chewing carefully with his false teeth, and lifting his bloodshot eyes, which had no visible lids to them, to Nekhludoff. "Stephen," he said, with his mouth full, addressing the stout, dignified butler, and pointing with his eyes to the empty place. Though Nekhludoff knew Korchagin very well, and had often seen him at dinner, today this red face with the sensual smacking lips, the fat neck above the napkin stuck into his waistcoat, and the whole overfed military figure struck him very disagreeably. Then Nekhludoff remembered, without wishing to, what he knew of the cruelty of this man, who, when in command, used to have men flogged and even hanged, without rhyme or reason, simply because he was rich, and had no need to curry favour. "Immediately, your Excellency," said Stephen, getting a large soup ladle out of the sideboard, which was decorated with a number of silver vases. He made a sign with his head to the handsome footman, who began at once to arrange the untouched knives and forks on the napkin, elaborately folded with the embroidered family crest uppermost, in front of the empty place next to Missy. Nekhludoff went round shaking hands with every one, and all, except old Korchagin and the ladies, rose when he approached. And this walk round the table, this shaking the hands of people, with many of whom he never talked, seemed unpleasant and odd. He excused himself for being late, and was about to sit down between Missy and Katerina Alexeyevna, but old Korchagin insisted that, if he would not take a glass of vodka, he should at least take a bit of something to whet his appetite, at the side table, on which stood small dishes of lobster, caviare, cheese, and salt herrings. Nekhludoff did not know how hungry he was until he began to eat, and then, having taken some bread and cheese, he went on eating eagerly. "Well, have you succeeded in undermining the basis of society?" asked Kolosov, ironically quoting an expression used by a retrograde newspaper in attacking trial by jury. "Acquitted the culprits and condemned the innocent, have you?" "Undermining the basis, undermining the basis," repeated Prince Korchagin, laughing. He had a firm faith in the wisdom and learning of his chosen friend and companion. At the risk of seeming rude, Nekhludoff left Kolosov's question unanswered, and sitting down to his steaming soup, went on eating. "Do let him eat," said Missy with a smile. The pronoun him she used as a reminder of her intimacy with Nekhludoff. Kolosov went on in a loud voice and lively manner to give the contents of the article against trial by jury, which had aroused his indignation. Mrs. Cousin, Mikhail Sergeyevich, endorsed all his statements, and related the contents of another article in the same paper. Missy was, as usual, very distinguée, and unobtrusively well dressed. "You must be terribly tired," she said, after waiting until Nekhludoff had swallowed what was in his mouth. "Not particularly. And you? Have you been to look at the pictures?" he asked. "No, we put that off. We have been playing tennis at the Salamatovs. It is quite true, Mr. Crooks plays remarkably well." Nekhludoff had come here in order to distract his thoughts, for he used to like being in this house, both because of its refined luxury had a pleasant effect on him, and because of the atmosphere of tender flattery that unobtrusively surrounded him. But today everything in the house was repulsive to him. Everything. Beginning with the doorkeeper, the broad staircase, the flowers, the footman, the table decorations, up to Missy herself, who today seemed unattracted and affected. Kolosov's self-assured, trivial tone of liberalism was unpleasant, as was also the sensual, self-satisfied, bull-like appearance of old Korchagin, and the French phrases of Katerina Alexeyevna, the Slavophil. The constrained looks of the governess and the student were unpleasant too, but most unpleasant of all was the pronoun him that Missy had used. Nekhludoff had long been wavering between two ways of regarding Missy. Sometimes he looked at her as if by moonlight, and could see in her nothing but what was beautiful, fresh, pretty, clever, and natural. Then suddenly, as if the bright sun shone on her, he saw her defects, and could not help seeing them. This was such a day for him. Today he saw all the wrinkles of her face, knew which of her teeth were false, saw the way her hair was crimped, the sharpness of her elbows, and above all, how large her thumbnail was, and how like her father's. "Tennis is a dull game," said Kolosov. "We used to play lapta when we were children. That was much more amusing." "Oh no, you never tried it. It's awfully interesting," said Missy, laying, it seemed to Nekhludoff, a very affected stress on the word awfully. Then a dispute arose in which Mikhail Sergeyevitch, Katerina Alexeyevna, and all the others took part, except the governess, the student, and the children, who sat silent and wearied. "Oh, these everlasting disputes," said old Korchagin, laughing, and he pulled the napkin out of his waistcoat, noisily pushed back his chair, which the footman instantly caught hold of, and left the table. Everybody rose after him, and went up to another table, on which stood glasses of scented water. They rinsed their mouths, then resumed the conversation, interesting to no one. "Don't you think so?" said Missy to Nekhludoff, calling for a confirmation of the statement that nothing shows up a man's character like a game. She noted that preoccupied and, as it seemed to her, dissatisfied look which she feared, and she wanted to find out what had caused it. "Really, I can't tell. I have never thought about it," Nekhludoff answered. "Will you come to Mamma?" asked Missy. "Yes, yes," he said, in a tone which plainly proved that he did not want to go, and took out a cigarette. She looked at him in silence, with a questioning look, and he felt ashamed. To come into a house and give the people the dumps, he thought about himself. Then, trying to be amiable, said that he would go with pleasure, if the princess would admit him. "Oh yes, Mamma will be pleased. You may smoke there, and Ivan Ivanovitch is also there." The mistress of the house, Princess Sophia Vassilievna, was a recumbent lady. It was the 8th year that, when visitors were present, she lay in lace and ribbons, surrounded with velvet, gilding, ivory, blondes, lacquer, and flowers, never going out, and only, as she put it, receiving intimate friends, i.e., those who, according to her idea, stood out from the common herd. Nekhludoff was admitted into the number of these friends because he was considered clever, because his mother had been an intimate friend of the family, and because it was desirable that Missy should marry him. Sophia Vassilievna's room lay beyond the large and the small drawing-rooms. In the large drawing-room, Missy, who was in front of Nekhludoff, stopped resolutely, and taking hold of the back of a small green chair, faced him. Missy was very anxious to get married, and as he was a suitable match, and she also liked him, she had accustomed herself to the thought that she should be hers, not she his. To lose him would be very mortifying. She now began talking to him in order to get him to explain his intentions. "I see something has happened," she said. "Tell me, what is the matter with you?" He remembered the meeting in the law court, and frowned and blushed. "Yes, something has happened," he said, wishing to be truthful. "A very unusual and serious event." "What is it, then? Can you not tell me what it is?" She was pursuing her aim with that unconscious yet obstinate cunning, often observable in the mentally diseased. Not now. Please do not ask me to tell you. I have not yet had time fully to consider it." And he blushed still more. "And so you will not tell me?" A muscle twitched in her face, and she pushed back the chair she was holding. "Well then, come." She shook her head as if to expel useless thoughts, and faster than usual went out in front of him. He fancied that her mouth was unnaturally compressed in order to keep back the tears. He was ashamed of having hurt her, and yet he knew that the least weakness on his part would mean disaster, i.e. would bind him to her, and today he feared this more than anything, and silently followed her to the princess's cabinet. End of Book 1, Chapter 26.